In this video, I'm going to give you 10 tips for being more assertive. Okay, tip number one, and I suppose it's probably the simplest thing and the most difficult one at the same time, and that is decide you're going to be more assertive. You need to commit to being more assertive. You have to tell yourself things like, I'm going to be more assertive, or people are going to stop treating me like a doormat. Should expect some resistance, though, from people who are used to pushing you around. So, for example, if you've got a bullying boss who doesn't respect you and treats you like a doormat, then it's time to look for another job. Okay, tip number two is to be a good listener. Now, I know that sounds strange if you're trying to be assertive, that you should actually be passive and listen, but try to understand the other person's point of view. Don't interrupt when they're explaining things to you, even if you get what they're saying before they finish. Being assertive doesn't mean you have to sort of push yourself forward all the time. But if you do have any objections or any problems, explain them clearly and unambiguously without yelling. For example, you might want to say something like, I understand why you might say this because you feel that, but I'd like to make you aware of the other. And hey presto, you're in control. Okay, tip number three is learn how to say no without feeling guilty. Now, it's very easy to say yes, and saying no often makes us feel guilty. And of course, some people will manipulate this and lay on a guilt trip to get us to say yes. But you do have to sometimes stand your ground and not let people push you around. Now, to counter this, what you can do is to say no and mean it. You should be polite, but firm. Say something like, I'm very sorry, but no. And that's it. End of discussion. You don't want to get involved in any further debate or let people wear you down, because sometimes people will try to turn that no into a yes, or try and break down your resolve. In which case, you can say something like, I've given you my answer and that's final. And then that's it. Don't give this decision any further thought. Walk away, literally if need be. But of course, you should be reasonable. If your neighbor comes to you and says, my house is on fire, can I borrow your fire extinguisher? Well, you don't really want to say no, do you? You should say yes and claim the cost of it back from him later, probably. And of course, if your boss is asking you to do something that's, perhaps slightly outside of your job description, it might be a good idea to say yes just to keep him or her sweet. But otherwise, make your decision, say no, and that's it, move on. Okay, tip number four is agree to disagree. Having a different point of view doesn't necessarily mean that you or the other person are wrong. And debate can actually be quite healthy. On the other hand, you should pick your battles carefully. As I was just saying in the previous tip, you don't need to stand your ground on everything. You don't need to prove you're right and assertive all the time. And this is particularly true in relationships. And also bear in mind that there is a fine line between being assertive and being aggressive. Okay, tip number five is don't feel the need to have an opinion on everything. Sometimes it's easy to say yes just to avoid a potential conflict or a difference of opinion. But of course, the trouble is if you keep saying yes to one thing and then you say yes to another point of view, then that's not coming over as being very assertive. But if there's something that somebody asks you an opinion on and it doesn't really matter, then say, I don't care, or it doesn't make any difference to me one way or the other. And that can diffuse a situation without coming over as a pushover or a yes man or a yes woman. All right, tip number 6 is to use I statements. And this lets others know what you're thinking without sounding accusatory. So start sentences with I. I think this. I feel that. But don't use aggressive language such as you always or you never. That sounds accusatory. And although it is assertive, it is also very aggressive and it's not going to improve your standing. Okay, tip number 7 is to rehearse what you say. And a good way to do this is to practice in front of a mirror. Say what you want to say out loud. It'll feel a bit strange when you first do it, but you'll get used to it in a while. And you could also ask a friend that you trust to critique you. You should also think of possible replies and have a counter strategy in place so that you can still be assertive, but without having somebody be able to sort of counter the argument in their favor. Tip number 8. Body language is just as important as spoken language. And you want to act confident even if you don't feel it. Keep an upright posture, but lean forward just a little bit when people are speaking to you and you're speaking to people. You want to make regular eye contact and maintain a neutral or positive facial expression. But don't wring your hands or use dramatic gestures because that's really quite passive body language. Tip number 9 is stay calm. Don't lose your temper and let a discussion turn into an argument. And when you're having a discussion, never raise your voice because it's a surefire sign that you're on the back foot. You should breathe normally, look the person in the eye, keep your face relaxed, and speak in a normal voice. Remember the old wartime spirit, keep calm and carry on. And finally, tip number 10 is be patient. If you've gained a reputation as a pushover, then sadly you're not going to lose it overnight. And being assertive is a skill that needs practice. But first, practice your new skills in low-risk situations. So if you do have to back down, it's not really a big deal. And you'll always do better sometimes than at other times. But you can always learn from your mistakes. So there we go, 10 tips to being more assertive.